A ridge cabin in eastern Kentucky, February, sometime in the 1780s. The room smells like scorched wool and green oak smoke. A man stands in front of a fireplace 7 feet wide and 5 feet tall, and his face is red and his shirt front is hot to the touch. 4 feet behind him, the water in the bucket by the door has skinned over with ice. He will cut and split 40 cords of hardwood this winter to sit in that room and still be cold. But here is the twist. He is not doing it wrong. He is doing exactly what he was taught. That fire was never heating the cabin. It was emptying it. In December of 1941, 2 engineers with the United States Department of Agriculture, Arthur Center and Thomas Miller, published Farmers Bulletin 1889, titled simply Fireplaces and Chimneys. It was written for farmers who would stand over a mason's shoulder and watch their own house go up. It cost 15 cents. Inside it is a sentence that undoes 300 years of American belief. Their tests showed that an ordinary fireplace pulls about 5 times the amount of air a living room needs for even liberal ventilation. 5 times. Every cubic foot of that air was heated by something, and every cubic foot went up the flue, replaced by cold air pulled in through the door gaps and the window sash. Then they measured what was left. As ordinarily constructed, they wrote, a fireplace is only about 1/3 as efficient as a good stove. That is not folklore. That is the federal government confirming in print that the roaring hearth on the Christmas card is an air pump with a fire in it. The wood never failed. The box did. I'm going to give you 7 corrections from the record. Every one of them is free or nearly free to act on this Saturday. The first correction is not a technique at all. It is the reason the other 6 were allowed to disappear, and I am going to hold it until the end, because if I give it to you now, you will not believe the 6 that come before it. Civilization is fine, by the way. The stores are open. The furnace works. This is not about collapse. This is about the difference between a man who owns his own hearth and a man who rents his warmth by the month. Number 7, the size. The kitchen hearth at Mount Vernon is the kind you have seen in 100 photographs. Tall enough to stand in, wide enough to swing a crane and hang 3 pots. It looks like abundance. It looks like a family that was never cold. Center and Miller wrote something colder. In colonial days, when cordwood was plentiful, fireplaces 7 feet wide and 5 feet high were common, especially in kitchens. They required large amounts of fuel and too frequently were smoky. That is a government engineer being polite about a room full of people coughing. Here is the mechanism. A firebox is not a container for heat. It is the mouth of a pump. The bigger the mouth, the more room air the fire swallows and sends up the flue, and the more cold air comes in behind it. The bulletin is blunt about oversizing. A fire large enough to fill an oversized chamber would be too hot for the room and would waste fuel. So the Frontier family enlarged the mouth, and the mouth ate the wood lot. A typical colonial household burned 30 to 40 cords a year. A cord is 128 cubic feet, stacked 4 feet high, 4 deep, 8 long. By the middle of the 1700s, the forest around the older settlements was visibly thinning. And what does the same federal bulletin recommend? 30 to 36 inches wide for a room with 300 square feet of floor, not 84 inches, 36. The failure mode is inheriting an oversized firebox and trying to fill it because an empty-looking fireplace feels wrong. Do not fill it. Build a compact fire on the front third of the hearth and let the back of the box stay dark. Costs nothing. Small box, hot back, near wood. The winter never got bigger. The firebox did. Number 6, the depth. There is a photograph in that bulletin of a shallow bedroom fireplace with a sloping back, the type built before stoves became general. It looks stingy. It is the better heater, and the bulletin says so in one plain line. A shallow opening throws out relatively more heat than a deep one of the same width. The reason is radiation. Almost all the useful warmth from an open fire arrives the way sunlight arrives, in a straight line, from the flames and from the hot brick behind them. So the question is not how much wood the box holds. It is how much glowing surface is aimed at the room. Push the fire 2 feet back into a deep box, and you have hidden your radiator inside a masonry cave. The bricks get hot. The bricks warm the ground. You get the smell and the sound and very little of the heat. The recommended depth in the 1941 tables is 16 to 18 inches. 12 will still draft properly if the throat is right. They only advise deeper so that burning brands do not roll out onto the floorboards. Now, the two columns. A cast iron fireback, which is a plate that sits against the rear wall and throws radiant heat forward, runs under $100 and outlives you. A fireplace insert with a blower runs $3,000 to $5,000 installed. The older answer is not close in price. The failure mode is habit. People shove the logs to the back wall because it feels tidier. Build forward. Use a screen. That is the whole change. Forward fire, bright brick, straight line. Depth buys burn time. Shallowness buys heat. Number 5, the throat, pattern break. What comes next is the piece almost nobody knows exists, and it decides whether anything else you do matters. Above your fireplace opening, hidden behind the brick, is a narrow slot where the firebox necks down before it opens into the smoke chamber. That slot is called the throat. It is perhaps 8 inches of masonry, and it does more work than the entire chimney above it. The bulletin gives the dimensions without ceremony. The throat sits 6 to 8 inches above the bottom of the lintel. Its area should be not less than that of the flue. Its length should equal the full width of the opening. Above it sits the smoke shelf, 6 to 12 inches deep, which catches cold air falling down the flue and turns it back before it can push smoke into your face. And then Center and Miller wrote the line that tells you how badly this gets botched. Proper throat construction is so necessary to a successful fireplace that the work should be inspected several times a day during construction. Several times a day. That is not how the federal government writes about decoration. In a standard box fireplace, incoming air spills over the sharp steel edge of the lintel, tumbles, mixes with the smoke, and rolls upward. Every one of those tumbles is heated room air being dragged out of your house. Rumford solved it in 1796 by rounding the masonry above the fire so the flow ran smooth instead of turbulent. I am not your building inspector. If your throat is wrong, that is masonry, and masonry is a mason's business. But here is your Saturday action, straight out of the bulletin. If your fireplace smokes, hold a sheet of metal across the top of the opening and lower it slowly until the smoke stops coming into the room. Mark the sides where the bottom edge sits. That mark is the height your opening should have been. Aluminum flashing costs about $6, and a permanent shield can be cut from the same stock. $6 against the 4,000 people pay to have the thing rebuilt. 6 inches up, flue width across, shelf behind. The chimney does not pull the smoke. The throat does. Number 4, the damper. 1941 again, and a sentence about a hinged iron lid that has sat in 10 million American chimneys without once being adjusted on purpose. A roaring pine fire may require a full throat opening, but slow-burning hardwood logs may need only 1 or 2 inches. Regulating the opening according to the kind of fire prevents waste of heat up the chimney. 1 or 2 inches, not open, not shut, adjusted deliberately to the fuel you put in. The damper is the only valve you own on that 5 times ventilation figure. Wide open, your fire is a hole in your roof with a curtain of hot air rushing through it. Narrowed to the fire you actually built. The heat has time to reach the brick, and the brick has time to reach you. The bulletin goes further, and this applies to every house with a furnace. When air heated by the furnace is carried up the chimney, that is furnace fuel wasted. On a January night with no fire lit at all, an open damper is quietly selling your paid heat to the sky. Nobody was ever shown the damper. That is not on you. There is no salesman on earth whose living depends on you understanding a hinged iron lid. Reach up with a flashlight, find the handle, work it through its full travel. Then take a file or a dab of paint and mark 3 positions on the frame. Full for kindling, half for a working fire, barely cracked for hardwood coals. Under $5 and you will use it every night for the rest of your life. Full to start, half to burn, cracked to hold. The damper is not a smoke control, it is a door. If this is useful to you, subscribe. I put back 1 piece of the record every week. Number 3, the wood. I was 14. Eli was gone to town and I wanted the cabin warm when he got back. So I cut standing white oak, split it, hauled it in, and built the biggest fire of my life. Green oak. Cut that morning. He came through the door into a room full of smoke, with the walls sweating and a black wet shine already forming inside the flue where the good draft used to be. I stood there waiting to be taken apart. He looked at the fire, and he looked at the flue, and he said, "Now you know." Then he showed me why. Green wood may contain as high as 40% water. Dry wood, 15 to 20. Those are the bulletin's figures, and the arithmetic is savage. Burning wet wood spends your fire's energy boiling water you paid to haul. The fire runs cool, and when wood burns slowly and cool, it gives off acetic and pyrolinous acid, which combine with that moisture and condense on the cold walls of the flue as creosote. Creosote is not soot. Creosote is tar. When it ignites, the bulletin says, it makes a very hot fire likely to crack the masonry and char adjacent timbers. We lost a neighbor to a flue like that, not to a blizzard, not to hunger, to 3 winters of wet wood and a chimney nobody looked inside, and it is still happening. The National Fire Protection Association finds the leading factor in home heating fires, roughly 1 in 4, is failure to clean, principally creosote from chimneys. That is not a frontier problem. That is a Tuesday. Now, the money. A cord of split-seasoned hardwood delivered runs $275 to $400. If that cord is actually green, you paid full price for a load that is 40% water. On $400, that is $160 of water delivered to your driveway, which you will then spend your own fire's heat boiling off. The failure mode is trusting the word seasoned. It is a sales adjective. It has no legal meaning at the tailgate, so here is the best $18 in this video. Buy a pin-type moisture meter. Take a piece from the middle of the stack, split it open, and press the pins into the fresh inside face, not the weathered outside, 20% or under. If it reads 30, that is next winter's wood. And I am not your fire marshal, but have the flue looked at before the first fire of the season. Every year, weight, sound, moisture. Heavy is wet. A dull thud is wet. The meter does not care what the man told you. You did not buy firewood. You bought water at $300 a cord. Number 2, where they put the chimney. Stand in front of an original center chimney farmhouse in New England sometime, one built before the Revolution. The chimney comes up through the middle of the house. The stack is enormous, and every room is wrapped around it. That was not architecture. That was engineering. And here is the proof from 1941. A chimney located entirely inside a building has better draft because the masonry retains heat longer when protected from cold outside air. And this on creosote. The formation of creosote is unusual in chimneys that are surrounded by warm rooms. Read those together and the old house explains itself. Put the mass in the middle and it becomes a storage battery. It holds the fire's heat for hours after the coals die and gives it back through the walls of 4 rooms at once. The flue stays warm, so the smoke stays hot, so the tar stays in the smoke instead of on the brick. One decision made at the foundation. Free. Then we moved the chimney to the outside wall because it looks handsome from the road, because it opens the floor plan, because it is cheaper than framing a whole house around a masonry core. Every one of those is ordinary and unromantic. That is the whole conspiracy. There is no cabal. There is a sightline and a bid sheet. But your exterior chimney now sits in the weather. The flue runs cold. The smoke chills on the way up. The tar drops out onto the wall, and every cold start puffs backward into your living room. The failure mode is that cold start, and then you spend the evening apologizing to your family for a problem that is not yours. Prime it first. Roll a sheet of newspaper into a torch, light it, and hold it up inside the open damper for 30 seconds until you feel the draft reverse and start pulling. Free, and it works every time. Warm the flue, then the fire. They moved the chimney outside for the photograph. The heat went with it. Number 1, I told you this would not be a technique. This is the payload, and it is the reason the 6 things you just heard fell out of ordinary knowledge. In 1744, Benjamin Franklin published a pamphlet called An Account of the New Invented Pennsylvanian Fireplaces. It described an iron box set out into the room, radiating heat from every side instead of sending it up a masonry cave. It worked. The deputy governor of Pennsylvania, George Thomas, offered Franklin a patent, the sole vending of them for a term of years. Franklin refused it. He wrote that since we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, we should be glad of the chance to serve others by any invention of ours, and that we should do it freely and generously. Free, given away. 1744. 52 years later, Rumford published The Throat and the Splayed Reflecting Walls, and London rebuilt 250 hearths inside of 2 months. Jefferson put them in at Monticello. Thoreau listed them among the conveniences everyone had stopped noticing. And then, around 1850, we stopped. Not because they were disproven, because coal came, and coal wanted a different grate. Because a stove is easier to sell than a shape. Because a square firebox is faster for a mason to lay, and the mason is paid by the day. Because the fireplace stopped being an appliance and became a line on a real estate listing, and nobody has ever put throat dimensions in a listing. Not a conspiracy, just how markets work. A proportion cannot be trademarked, a shape cannot be shipped in a box. There has never been a single quarter in American history in which somebody's revenue depended on you knowing the correct depth of a firebox. And here is where the record goes from sad to plain. On February 26, 1988, the Environmental Protection Agency issued the new source performance standards for residential wood heaters. Wood stoves were covered, certain inserts were covered, fireplaces were left out entirely. The agency later explained why in the Federal Register, and you should hear it exactly as written. Fireplaces were not included because typical fireplaces are not considered to be effective heaters. Most of the heat content from the wood burned in a typical fireplace is lost out the chimney rather than heating a room. That exclusion still stands. So take the measure of that. The most emotionally loaded object in the American house, the thing we build our living rooms around, the thing that stands in for home in every language we have, is not classified by the federal government as a heating appliance at all. Nobody lied to you. That is what makes it hurt. The physics was given away for nothing in 1744. The correction was published in 1796. The measurements were printed for 15 cents in 1941. And the regulator said out loud in 1988 that the thing is not a heater, all of it public, none of it hidden. And still it did not reach you because there was no money in the reaching. That is not on you. They are good at selling. You were sold a picture of a fire, and the picture was beautiful, and the picture was not a heater. Franklin gave it away. The catalog took it back. So here's what I would ask of you, and it is small. This Saturday, find your damper handle and mark 3 positions on it with a file. Under $5, 20 minutes, and it will save you more wood this winter than any tool you could buy. Farmers Bulletin, 1889, is public domain. Center and Miller, December 1941. Every number I gave you tonight is in there, and it will cost you nothing to read. Now tell me something in the comments. Did your grandparents' house have the chimney in the middle or on the outside wall? I want to know because I have a suspicion about which houses stayed in families and which ones got sold. Next time, the ash bucket, a law from 1862 that made a common household product illegal to produce at home, and why every farm in this country had a leach barrel behind the smokehouse until roughly 1940 and then did not. That man on the ridge in 1782 was cold because the shape was wrong, not because the winter was hard. The winter was never the problem. 40 cords went up that flue every year to keep one man's face warm and his back frozen, and the fix had already been given away for free before he ever swung the axe. You have it now, a mark on a damper handle and a number on a meter. Keep the old ways. They kept us.